tonight
Yeah.
in this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to look quietly at the emotional weight of the money inside your wallet.
Yeah, and it really is a weight that almost all of us carry. It dictates our days, our relationships, our stress levels, and yet, well, we rarely have the vocabulary to describe what it actually is.
We really don't. And before we get into the mechanisms of why we do what we do, I want to clearly lay out the mission for this deep dive.
Great.
Today, we are opening up a stack of, frankly, fascinating research. We are pulling from Dr. Brad Klontz's evolutionary models of financial psychology. We are looking at Susan Forward's clinical work on emotional blackmail. We have Murray Bowen's foundational family systems theory and Doug Leane's behavioral archetype.
There's a lot of ground to cover, but it's so important.
It is. We are taking all of this science, all this data, and we're using it to understand a very specific, very quiet human struggle. I mean, the struggle of why setting a financial boundary with the people we love feels so impossibly dangerous.
It is a profound friction. And the goal here is to decode that friction, right?
Sure.
To take it out of the realm of abstract numbers on a spreadsheet and root it deeply in the human experience.
Yeah, exactly. So to start us off, I want to paint a picture of a moment. And if you are listening to this, I can almost guarantee you know this moment perfectly.
Oh, absolutely.
You were sitting at a dinner with friends, or maybe a family gathering, or, perhaps it is even simpler than that. You were just sitting on your couch, and you open a group chat.
The dreaded group chat.
Right. And it's about a shared gift for a coworker, or a sibling's upcoming wedding, or a weekend trip. You are scrolling through the messages, reading the cheerful banter, and then someone suggests an expense.
A specific restaurant, a vacation rental, a mandatory contribution amount.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know the immediate physiological response to that number.
It is instantaneous.
It really is. Your stomach just drops, the temperature in your face changes. You look at that number on the screen, and, logically, it is outside your budget.
It crosses a line.
Right. It crosses a line for you.
Yeah.
It is money you cannot or, should not spend. I mean, you have your own rent to pay. You have debt you are trying to clear. You have your own life to fund.
But the rational knowledge of your budget doesn't stop what happens next?
No, it doesn't. And this is where the internal dialogue begins. You sit there staring at the screen, or maybe looking across the table at the restaurant,
Yeah.
and you think about typing out, "No, I can't do that," or "That doesn't work for my budget."
But you do.
No, instead of setting that simple boundary, you feel this familiar, heavy fog roll into your mind. Your brain starts running a very different kind of math.
It isn't financial math anymore.
Exactly. You are suddenly calculating the cost of the money versus the cost of the disappointment on their faces. You calculate the cost of the awkwardness. You calculate the risk of being seen as cheap or unsupportive or difficult.
You are weighing your financial security against your social security.
Yes. And almost every single time, Social Security wins.
It wins easily.
You swipe the card, you agree to the loan, you chip in, you type back into the group chat, "Sounds great, count me in,"
Yeah.
with a little smiley face.
Right. And then comes the aftermath, which honestly is often the heaviest part of the entire cycle.
Yes, the aftermath. Because the moment the transaction is complete, the moment the message is sent, you walk away feeling this quiet, hollow resentment. And what is so striking to me about this pattern is that the resentment isn't usually directed at your friends or your family. You aren't really angry at them for asking.
You are furious with yourself.
You are.
Yeah.
You lie awake at 2 a.m. asking, why is it so hard for me to just say no? Why does setting an incredibly basic financial boundary feel like I am risking my entire relationship?
And this is where we need to take a very gentle, very honest look at what is actually happening underneath the surface of that transaction. Because, the prevailing narrative in the personal finance space, the advice we are constantly fed by gurus and influencers, is that this is a math problem.
Right.
Or worse, a discipline problem. They tell you that you just lack willpower.
Just make a budget and stick to it. Stop buying lattes for your friends.
I mean, it is treated as a moral failing.
Exactly. Well, that is the friction right there. This is not a moral failing. This isn't about being bad at math. This is the profound, ancient tension of being human. We feel this immense, crushing anxiety when our financial reality collides with our deep, primal need to keep the peace and stay connected to the people we love. What you are experiencing in that group chat is a collision of 2 completely different operating systems.
Okay, let's unpack this collision, because I think we have a habit of dressing this behavior up in very noble clothing. When we talk about chipping in or buying the dinner or giving a family member a loan we can't afford, we label it as generosity.
Right.
We call it being a good friend, or being a dutiful child. We tell ourselves we are just being selfless. But I want the listener to really consider the physical sensation we just described.
The tight chest, the sinking stomach, the frantic mental math, the resentment afterward. I have felt joyful generosity. Joyful giving feels light. It feels expansive. It feels free. The feeling we are talking about today, that isn't joyful giving. That feels like survival.
That distinction changes everything, honestly. When the physical response is anxiety, tightness, or a mental fog of confusion, we are no longer in the realm of joyful generosity.
Right.
We have crossed the border into survival mechanics, and today we are exploring a clinical concept that defines exactly this experience. We are looking at what is called financial attachment and the herd instinct.
Financial attachment and the herd instinct. Let's ground that. What does that actually mean for the person sitting in their car, dreading looking at their bank app?
Well, by definition, this is the unconscious way we use money, whether we are spending it, hiding it, giving it away, or even holding it, to negotiate our belonging.
Negotiating our belonging.
Exactly. It is the practice of using our material resources to manage the emotions of the people around us, to ensure we aren't abandoned by our tribe. It means we are treating currency not as a neutral unit of economic exchange, but as a highly charged unit of emotional security.
It makes me think of an emotional thermostat. We subconsciously use our bank accounts to regulate the temperature of our relationships.
I love that analogy.
Right. Think about walking into a room or stepping into a family dynamic. If someone seems disappointed or distant or frustrated, the temperature of that room feels incredibly cold.
And for some of us, that coldness feels profoundly unsafe.
Yes, our nervous system starts blaring alarms. So what do? We turn up the financial heat to warm them back up. We buy the dinner. We offer the loan. We say yes to the expensive bridesmaid dress. We burn our own resources to regulate their emotions so that the room gets warm again and we can feel safe in their presence.
The thermostat is a masterful way to visualize it. Because, a thermostat operates in the background. It is entirely unconscious. We don't sit down and rationally say to ourselves, I am going to spend $300 I don't have to ensure this person doesn't abandon me.
Right, that would be absurd.
We simply feel the coldness of their potential disappointment, and we react to warm it up. If you have ever felt like your wallet is actually a tool for managing guilt, managing fear, or managing a heavy sense of obligation,
Which so many of us do.
then you are experiencing the deep collision between your financial life and your psychological attachment style. So for the listener who has always wondered what is wrong with them, nothing is wrong. This is what it's called.
Before we look at the science behind why our minds do this, if you find yourself relating to these quiet, everyday moments, we invite you to subscribe to Leone Patterns. Leave a comment and share what this brings up for you. We are building a space where we understand money not just as numbers, but as a deeply human experience.
To truly understand why our minds operate this way, we have to look backward, far backward. We need to explore the psychology and the evolutionary biology that built the human brain.
Okay, let's go there.
Let's dive into the evolutionary model of financial psychology, heavily researched by experts like Dr. Brad Klontz. We have to remember that for hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in nomadic tribes. These were small, interdependent groups, typically capping out at around 100 to 150 people.
Right, our ancestors roaming the plains, no stock markets, no credit scores, just the tribe and the elements.
Correct. And in that harsh environment, the brain developed its fast, automatic survival system. Psychologists refer to this as System 1.
System 1.
Yes, System 1 is rapid, highly emotional, and completely instinctual. It doesn't do long-term math, it reacts to immediate threats. And in those ancient nomadic tribes, System 1 was wired with one absolute, non-negotiable rule for keeping you alive.
And what was that rule?
Sharing is caring and saving is hoarding.
Wait, sharing is caring and saving is hoarding. That completely flips modern financial advice on its head. Everything we are taught today is that saving is the ultimate virtue.
Because modern advice is built for a world that has only existed for a fraction of a second in evolutionary time. Wow. Think about a prehistoric tribe. If you found a rare food source, a cache of berries, or a small animal, and you decided to hoard those resources for yourself, hiding them from the group to ensure your own future comfort, you became an active threat to the collective survival of the tribe.
Because if the tribe weakens, everyone dies.
Precisely. The penalty for hoarding was severe. You would be banished. And in that environment, banishment didn't mean you just packed up and started a new life in a neighboring village. banishment was a death sentence.
A single human could not survive alone against predators and winter.
Right. Therefore, Dr. Clonce's research suggests there is an evolutionary anti-saving instinct baked directly into our DNA. We are biologically terrified of accumulating resources at the expense of the group.
I want to make sure I am grasping the scale of this. Are you saying that when I sit down on a Sunday afternoon, open up a spreadsheet, and try to carve out a budget to save money for my own retirement, my ancient brain literally thinks I'm about to be kicked out of the village and eaten by a bear?
On a neurobiological level, yes.
That is wild.
That is the source of the friction. Your rational, modern brain system 2 knows you are just trying to build an emergency fund so you don't end up in debt. But your primal brain, system 1, perceives the act of withholding resources from the group as a fatal social error.
It triggers the amygdala.
Yes, it sends signals of panic. This is why saving feels inherently unnatural and restrictive to so many of us, and why sharing, even when it damages our own future, feels like literal survival.
But let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If we all have this deep biological anti-saving instinct, how does evolutionary biology explain the opposite extreme? What about people who are extreme hoarders? People who refuse to spend a single dime, who stockpile wealth and resources and alienate their families in the process. If we are wired to share, why do they exist?
That is a brilliant question, and it actually reinforces the model. Extreme financial hoarding is almost always a trauma response. It happens when System 1 decides that the tribe is no longer safe. If you grew up in an environment where your caregivers were deeply unreliable, or you experienced profound scarcity and abandonment, your survival brain rewrites the rule.
It basically says, the herd won't protect me.
Right. It says, the herd will not protect me. The herd might actually starve me. I must become my own herd. So the hoarding is still a survival mechanic. It is just a warped one, deployed when trust in the collective is entirely broken.
That makes so much sense.
But for the vast majority of us who are anxiously attached to our peers, the default setting is to share to secure our place.
That is staggering. It explains why the resistance to setting boundaries feels so physical.
Yeah.
It's not just a mental block. It's life or death to the ancient brain.
Exactly.
When my friend asked me to go to an expensive concert, my system 2 knows I have $40 in my checking account.
Yeah.
But my system 1 is screaming, if you don't go, they will forget you. You will be cast out and you will die alone.
And neuroscience provides the receipt for this. Studies have mapped what happens in the brain when we give resources away. The mesolimbic reward system, which is the exact same primitive part of the brain that is activated by food, by reproduction, by raw survival, lights up brilliantly when we give to others.
Wow.
We literally get a chemical high, a rush of dopamine and oxytocin from ensuring the tribe is okay. The brain chemically rewards us for prioritizing the herd over the individual.
So we are fighting a chemical addiction to people-pleasing disguised as generosity.
Basically, yes.
But we established earlier that the feeling of the group chat isn't a positive high. It's a hollow, resentful feeling. It's that heavy fog. How does the dopamine hit coexist with the anxiety?
Because the dopamine hit only lasts for the duration of the transaction, it relieves the immediate panic of abandonment. But once the survival threat is neutralized, your rational brain steps back in and realizes you just jeopardized your actual modern survival, like paying your rent.
Right.
That is where the fog rolls in. And that fog has a name in clinical psychology. Susan Forward, a clinical social worker and author, developed the concept of emotional blackmail, and she uses the acronym FOG. It stands for fear, obligation, and guilt.
Fear, obligation, guilt. Let's pause and really pull those apart because those are the three pillars of this entire dynamic.
Like horror.
We become caught in the FOG when the people in our lives use those three emotions to control our transactions. Let's look at fear first.
Fear is the immediate threat of withdrawal. If I don't pay for this dinner, my friend will be angry, they will think I'm cheap, they will stop inviting me out. The fear is social isolation.
What about obligation? That feels slightly different. Less about active punishment and more about, well, duty.
Exactly. Obligation sounds like. I have to co-sign this loan for my sibling because we are family and family helps family.
Right.
Or I am the one who went to college and got the corporate job, so it is my unwritten duty to fund the family vacations. It is a rigid, internalized rule about your role in the herd.
And then there is guilt. Guilt is the internal punisher.
Yes.
How can I possibly put money into a high-yield savings account for my future when my best friend is struggling to pay her medical bills? I am selfish. I am a bad person for having more than them.
And what's crucial to understand is that the other person doesn't even need to be intentionally manipulative. We often hear emotional blackmail and picture a villain twisting their mustache.
Totally.
But the FOG is usually a transactional dynamic we willingly, eagerly step into because our brains are so terrified of the alternative, we blackmail ourselves on their behalf.
It reminds me of the famous 1972 delay of gratification study by Walter Mischel at Stanford, the classic marshmallow test.
Oh, yes.
For anyone who hasn't heard of it, researchers put a marshmallow in front of a child and said, you can eat this one marshmallow right now. Or if you can sit here and wait 15 minutes without eating it, I will give you 2 marshmallows.
It is the ultimate demonstration of the tension between System 1 and System 2.
Right. And for decades, we have used this study to talk about financial discipline. We say that System 2, our slow, rational, modern brain, knows that delaying gratification leads to better outcomes. We know that if we don't spend the money now on the concert, we will have financial security later to buy a house. We tell people, just wait for the second marshmallow.
But when you add the herd instinct into the mix, it changes everything.
Exactly.
System 1, the survival brain, is screaming to eat the marshmallow right now, not just because it tastes good, but because in the ancient world, tomorrow isn't guaranteed.
Right.
If you don't consume the resource, or more importantly, share the resource to secure your social standing today, there might not be a tomorrow.
If we pull this thread even further, we can connect it to Dr. Murray Bowen's family systems theory.
Bowen's work is essential here.
Right. He was a pioneer in understanding how families operate as emotional units. He discovered that human beings are constantly, endlessly torn between 2 opposing life forces. On one side, we have individuality.
Yes.
This is the drive to be autonomous, to be our own person, to have our own boundaries and our own separate financial reality. On the other side, we have togetherness. This is the drive to interact, to merge, to belong to the group, to feel the warmth of the herd.
The ultimate tug of war. Every single day, we are trying to figure out how to be me without losing us.
That is the human condition in a sentence. And Bowen's science shows that our ability to handle financial stress without crumbling is directly tied to a concept he calls intrapsychic differentiation.
Intrapsychic differentiation, that is a heavy piece of clinical jargon.
It is.
Yeah.
Can we translate that into an ELI 5? Like I'm 5 for our listeners.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like in a living room?
Let's break it down. Differentiation is essentially the space between a feeling and an action.
Okay.
It is the ability to separate your rational thoughts from your emotional reactions. Let's say your adult child asks you for $1,000 they don't plan to pay back.
Classic scenario.
If you are poorly differentiated, your feeling of togetherness completely overrides your rational thoughts. You feel their anxiety, it becomes your anxiety, and you immediately write the check to make the bad feeling go away.
You fuse with their needs and abandon your individuality.
Exactly.
And if you are highly differentiated,
you feel the exact same anxiety, you still feel the guilt and the fear, the emotion doesn't vanish.
so you still feel the tug.
Yes, but intrapsychic differentiation means you have a pause button. You can feel the anxiety of their request, acknowledge that you want to help, but rationally conclude, if I give them this money, I cannot pay my property taxes. And you can calmly communicate that boundary without falling apart.
Okay, so we've named the invisible forces. We have the ancient survival brain terrified of the bear. We have the FOG of fear, obligation, and guilt. We have the intense tension between individuality and togetherness. But I want to move this out of the laboratory. How does this actually look in our daily lives?
Yeah.
Let's transition into the patterns, because these abstract psychological theories create very specific, very real, sometimes deeply destructive behaviors.
They absolutely do. To see this in action, we should look at a phenomenon known as the crab barrel effect.
The crab barrel.
Yes. This concept perfectly illustrates how we establish and violently maintain what we call a financial comfort zone within our peer groups.
I have heard this mentioned in passing, but paint that picture for us. How does the barrel work?
It is a fascinating quirk of nature. If you go crab fishing and you put a group of live crabs in a bucket or a barrel, you don't actually need to put a lid on it to keep them from escaping.
Wait, really?
Really, because the moment one crab figures out how to climb up the side and reaches the rim to escape, the other crabs will reach up, grab it by the legs, and pull it violently back down into the pile.
Oh, wow.
They ensure nobody leaves the collective. They enforce absolute togetherness.
And we do this to each other with money. We are the crabs.
Constantly, relentlessly. When you decide to set a financial boundary or stick to a budget or change your socioeconomic status, you become the crab trying to climb out of the barrel.
You are asserting your individuality.
Jen, the people around you, your family, your community, your oldest friends will subconsciously reach up and try to pull you back down.
Let me stop you there, because that sounds incredibly cynical. Are you saying that our friends and families are actively, maliciously trying to ruin our financial progress? Is it just pure jealousy?
No, and that is the most important nuance to grasp. It is rarely conscious malice. It is the biological fear of change.
The herd instinct.
Exactly. If you change your financial reality, if you stop participating in the group's spending habits, you are changing the rules of the tribe. The herd feels threatened.
Right.
They aren't thinking, I want to ruin her savings account. They're thinking, if she stops coming to our expensive dinners, we will lose her. If he becomes wealthy, he won't understand us anymore. They pull you down as a desperate plea for you not to leave them behind.
Give me a concrete example of this.
Right.
What does the crab pull actually look like?
Take the classic example of a young man who grows up in a rural community or an inner-city neighborhood surrounded by profound financial scarcity. It's a tight-knit community, but everyone struggles.
Okay.
He decides he wants a different life. He works relentlessly. He saves every penny, goes to college, enters the business world, and becomes highly successful. He has officially broken out of the barrel.
He has achieved the dream.
But what happens when Thanksgiving rolls around and he visits his family back home?
He faces the claws.
The claws come out. And they come out disguised as humor or gossip or passive-aggressive comments. He pulls into the driveway, and an uncle says, "Oh, look who it is. He's too good for the farm truck now."
Wow. Yeah.
He brings a nice bottle of wine, and a sibling mutters, "Must be nice to blow money on fancy grape juice while the rest of us are working real jobs." The social punishment for his success is immense.
Because his success highlights their stationary position in the barrel. It makes the rest of the crabs uncomfortable.
Exactly. And here's where the psychology gets really tragic. To cope with that unbearable social pressure, to relieve the immense effigy of guilt and the terror of being ostracized by his own family, what does that successful young man often do?
What does he do?
He will subconsciously self-sabotage.
He will intentionally ruin his own success just to fit back in.
Yes. He will start picking up everyone's tabs. He will make loans to relatives that he knows will never be repaid. He might even make terrible, risky investments or start gambling.
To bleed the money away.
Right. He will do whatever it takes to shrink his financial footprint so he can slip comfortably back into the pile with his loved ones. The primal need to belong will override his rational desire for prosperity.
That is heartbreaking. But it makes so much human sense. It explains the stories you hear of someone suddenly blowing a massive inheritance, or the person who consistently drains their savings account the second it hits $5,000.
Exactly.
They hit the ceiling of their financial comfort zone, the herd starts pulling, the anxiety spikes, and they just let go of the wall. They fall back down because the pain of isolation is worse than the pain of being broke.
To understand how these patterns manifest individually, we can look at the work of Doug Leone. He is an expert who works extensively with behavioral finance and the Enneagram personality system.
Oh, this is great.
He maps out how our specific childhood traumas and attachment styles create distinct, quiet financial patterns. He calls them our money monsters. Let's look at a few of these behavioral archetypes because I guarantee listeners will recognize themselves or their partners in these.
I love this framing because it takes the abstract science and gives it a face. Let's start with the pattern Leone calls the bleeder.
The bleeder maps to an avoidant type 2 personality structure. If you are a bleeder, your core unconscious belief is that you must buy your love and your value.
Yeah.
You believe that you, simply existing as yourself, are not enough to secure your place in the herd. So you give away your time, your energy, and your financial resources simply to feel needed.
Right.
You completely neglect your own financial health to play the role of the martyr. You are avoidant of your own needs, but hyper-focused on solving the needs of others.
I know this person. We all know this person. This is the friend who will quietly pay everyone's rent when they are short. They constantly pick up the tab for dinner. They buy extravagant gifts for birthdays. And they do it all while their own electricity is getting shut off or while they're drowning in credit card debt. And they do it because if they aren't the financial savior, they fear they have zero value to the group. If they stop paying, they fear everyone will leave.
That is the exact mechanism. They're bleeding out to keep the tribe hydrated. Now, the flip side of that, born from the exact same core wound of feeling unlovable, is the bonder.
The bonder.
This maps to an anxious type 2. The bonder also uses money in relationships, but instead of martyrdom, they use it to create dependency.
Dependency. So they're ensuring people have to stick around.
Yes. They ensure people have to appreciate them. A bonder might employ a family member who is entirely unqualified for the job just to be their boss, or they might buy a house for their adult child, but they keep the deed in their own name and constantly remind the child of the favor.
Wow.
They use financial resources to anxiously tether people to them. They are terrified that without that financial leash, the loved one will walk away.
It's the thermostat again. But instead of just warming the room, they're pumping the heat so high and locking the doors so nobody even wants to try to leave.
That is a perfect extension of the metaphor. And then we have a very common, very quiet pattern, the spud.
The spud.
This aligns with an avoidant type 9. The spud has a total, absolute allergy to financial conflict.
I have heard this called peace at any price sickness.
It is a sickness of accommodation. If you are a spud, you will completely merge with your partner's or your family's financial preferences, no matter how destructive they are, just to keep the peace. You surrender your individuality, your I position that Bowen talked about.
Give me a living example of the spud.
A spud is sitting at the kitchen table with their spouse. They know they have $500 in savings. The spouse comes in completely energized and says, I just found a boat. We can finance it for $800 a month. It will be amazing for the summer.
Oh, no.
The spud feels the terror in their chest. They know it will bankrupt them. But the thought of saying no, the thought of the ensuing argument, the pouting, the coldness, it is too much for their nervous system to bear.
Yeah.
So they swallow their panic, smile, and sign the dealership paperwork. They avoid the immediate emotional conflict by sacrificing their long-term financial survival.
They buy the boat to buy the peace. What about the pattern of dualistic thinking? We see this a lot in high achievers. Someone is incredibly driven, they make a massive salary, but their finances behind closed doors are an absolute disaster. I think Leone calls it the MC Hammer maneuver.
Yes, named after the famous musician who earned tens of millions of dollars but famously filed for bankruptcy. This pattern is fascinating. It involves anxiously earning a massive amount of money to feel safe from poverty, but simultaneously being terrified of interacting with that money.
Wait, if they're earning it to feel safe, why are they terrified of it?
Because interacting with it, sitting down to budget, looking at investment portfolios, acknowledging their wealth, brings up too much trauma, guilt, or anxiety about their place in the herd. So they earn anxiously, working 80-hour weeks, but they completely avoid saving, investing, or budgeting.
Let me use an analogy here.
Yeah.
It feels like they keep the car's engine running at the absolute red line, just driving as fast and hard as they can to get away from poverty, but they absolutely refuse to look down at the dashboard.
I want to expand on that dashboard analogy because it is exactly right. Think about what the dashboard actually shows you. The dashboard shows you how much fuel you have in the tank. It shows you if the engine is overheating.
Right.
For someone running the MC Hammer maneuver, looking at their financial dashboard forces them to confront reality. It forces them to see that despite earning $200,000 a year, their fuel tank is empty because they are funding their extended family's lifestyle. Or forces them to see that the engine is overheating with secret credit card debt.
And if they see it, they have to fix it.
Confronting that dashboard means they have to make a change. They have to set a boundary. And as we know, setting a boundary triggers the fear of banishment. So they just put a towel over the dashboard and drive faster.
That is exhausting just to think about. And it connects deeply to a psychological fear that I think drives so much of our career behavior, not just our spending, the fear of disappointing others. Atelophobia.
Atelophobia is technically the fear of imperfection. But in this context, it manifests specifically as the paralyzing fear of disappointing the herd.
I will look closely at this pipeline, from childhood to career, because the fear of disappointing others creates real, tangible limits on how much money people allow themselves to make.
It really does.
Think about a child who shows a lot of promise.
Yeah.
Let's say they are brilliant at math,
Mm-hmm.
or they are an incredible athlete.
Mm.
But every time they excel, every time they win an award, A sibling feels bad. The sibling cries.
Right.
And a parent, trying to manage the peace in the house, pulls the gifted child aside and says, "Stop being such a know-it-all. Hide your trophy. You're making your brother feel bad."
This is exactly where the behavioral conditioning takes root. That child learns a devastating rule.
Yeah.
My success causes emotional pain for the people I love. My excellence threatens the harmony of the tribe.
Exactly. So let's fast forward 30 years. That child is now a 35-year-old adult sitting in a salary negotiation. They know their market value is $120,000. But the HR manager across the table looks a little stressed. The budget is tight. What does the adult child do? Their ancient brain flashes back to the crying sibling. They feel the atelophobia. They don't want to make the HR manager uncomfortable. So they deliberately underbid.
They asked for $90,000.
They ask for $90,000. They hide their skills, they stay in a lower-paying job, or they refuse to ask for a promotion because making more money or achieving more success feels inherently dangerous. They are deliberately underachieving to protect the feelings of the tribe.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most pervasive pattern of the herd instinct: relative deprivation.
Relative deprivation.
We are biologically obsessed with our status within the herd. There was a famous study out of Purdue University a few years ago that looked at the correlation between income and happiness globally. They found a magical cutoff for emotional well-being.
Oh, I think I read about this.
They discovered that earning somewhere between $60,000 and $95,000 a year seemed to be the sweet spot for day-to-day emotional happiness. Earning more than that didn't make people significantly happier.
But the real driver of financial contentment isn't that absolute number, is it?
No, it isn't. The real driver is relative deprivation. It means we don't actually care about the absolute resources we have in a vacuum. We care immensely if we have less than the rest of our herd.
So it's not about being happy that you have $70,000. It's about being miserable that you have $70,000 when your neighbor suddenly has $85,000.
Precisely. If everyone in your village lives in a one-room cabin and eats potatoes, you don't feel poor. You feel secure because you match the herd. But the moment one person in the village builds a two-room cabin and buys a new car, you suddenly feel deprived.
Wow.
And this isn't just petty jealousy. Back in the prehistoric tribe, if you were the one with the fewest resources, you were the weakest member. You were the one most likely to be picked off by a predator or left behind in a famine.
So when your neighbor gets a new car, your System 1 brain doesn't just feel envious. It feels a biological threat.
This is why we spend so much money keeping up appearances. We are biologically driven to maintain our relative status to ensure we aren't the straggler of the herd.
I want to explicitly pause here. We have covered immense ground. We have talked about the ancient brain terrified of the bear. We have talked about the FOG, the fear, obligation, and guilt. We have talked about the crabs pulling you back into the barrel, the fear of disappointing others, the bleeding of your own resources to buy love, and the biological panic of relative deprivation.
It is a heavy reality to look at.
It is. I want to speak directly to the person listening to this right now. If you recognize yourself in this mirror we have held up, if you are the person who always picks up the check, even when you have to put it on a credit card, if you are the one who lends money you desperately need to family members who will never pay you back, if you are terrified of looking at your bank account because of what you've spent just to keep your kids or your friends happy, I want you to hear this very clearly, and I want you to let it settle into your bones. You are not broken. You are not financially irresponsible. You are not weak. You are human.
Your behavior, however stressful it might look on a spreadsheet, is an incredibly sophisticated survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed by evolution to do. It is prioritizing love, connection, and safety in the herd over a number on a screen. For hundreds of thousands of years, that exact instinct kept your ancestors alive. It is the reason you exist today.
The empathy driving your behavior is actually beautiful. Think about it. You are highly attuned to the emotional needs of the people around you. You feel the temperature drop in the room, and you want to warm them up. You care deeply about belonging.
That is a gift.
It is. The goal of this deep dive is not to kill this empathy. We don't want you to become cold or calloused or to stop caring about your friends. The goal is simply to understand it. You are reacting to the fear, obligation, and guilt. The FOG, exactly as a socially bonded human is designed to react.
It is not a flaw. It is a profound sensitivity that simply needs a new framework in the modern world. You don't need to fix yourself. You just need to update your operating system to understand that the bear is no longer outside the cave.
So how do we build that new framework? How do we connect this deeply human biological mechanism to the bigger picture of our lives?
Okay.
Because as we have clearly seen today, this is never just about the math.
Money is never just about money. It is the canvas where we paint our unmet childhood needs. In psychological terms, we refer to this as the sacred wound.
The sacred wound. Let's explore that canvas.
If you were a child who had to take on a parental role, perhaps your parents were emotionally volatile or financially unstable or struggled with addiction, you learned very early that your worth was tied entirely to making others comfortable.
Right.
If your mother's love was conditional on you not being a burden or being the good, low-maintenance kid who never asked for anything, you internalized a core rule for your life. My survival depends on minimizing my needs and maximizing my utility to others.
And as you grow up, your wallet just becomes a physical extension of that childhood utility. Yeah. You use your money to keep minimizing your needs and maximizing your usefulness to your friends and partners.
Exactly. And this circles us all the way back to Murray Bowen's theory of individuality versus togetherness. Because of that sacred wound, we often build what Bowen calls a pseudo-self.
A pseudo-self, a fake identity.
It's a highly reactive, chameleon-like identity constructed purely to gain approval and avoid abandonment. The pseudo-self doesn't have its own core values. It just absorbs the values of the herd.
Wow.
The pseudo-self agrees to expenses it secretly hates. It lends money it desperately needs. It smiles and types "sounds great" in the group chat while swallowing resentment.
But true psychological well-being, that can exist in the pseudo-self. It comes from what Bowen calls the essential self.
Yes, the essential self is the part of you that is grounded. It is the solid core underneath the trauma. It is the part of you that can calmly take that I position.
The I position.
The I position is the ability to stand in the room and say, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is what I can afford, without anger, without apologizing, and without a shred of guilt.
And we don't reach that essential self by just downloading a new budgeting app on our phones. We don't fix a sacred wound with an Excel spreadsheet.
Definitely not.
We heal this by looking at our lives through a lens that behavioral coaches call appreciative inquiry. Specifically, a model called the 5D framework. I want to walk through this practically because this is how we actually change the pattern. The 5Ds are define, discover, dream, design, and destiny.
It's a powerful framework. Let's apply this to a real scenario. Let's say you have a pattern of paying your adult siblings rent every time they overspend.
Okay, so the first step is define. You have to define the issue without shame.
Right.
You admit, I am paying my brother's rent not out of joyful generosity, but because I am terrified he will hate me if I stop and I am caught in the FOG. You name the monster.
Step 2 is discover. You discover your own strengths. You ask yourself, when I am not people-pleasing, what am I actually good at? What are my core values when I am not panicking about abandonment? You remember that you are actually a deeply grounded, logical person.
Step 3 is dream. This is where you allow your essential self to speak. You ask, what would my life look like if my money was entirely my own? What if I used that rent money to fund my own education or to finally take a breath from working overtime? You visualize the warmth of an independent life.
Step 4 is design. You design a new reality through one small, highly differentiated action.
Right. You don't cut your brother off screaming. You calmly call him and say, I love you, but I will not be able to contribute to your rent next month. I need to focus on my own financial health. You take the I position.
And finally, destiny. That word is vital here. Embracing your destiny means stepping fully into your essential self. When we finally align our financial resources with our true self, the most common fear is that we are abandoning our tribe. We fear we are becoming cold, selfish people.
But the profound, beautiful truth of this psychology is the exact opposite.
It really is.
By protecting your resources, you aren't abandoning anyone. You're actually gaining the capacity to serve the world genuinely. If you are constantly bleeding out to keep everyone happy, you are operating from a place of anxious, resentful attachment. But when you step into your essential self, you reach a place of wholeness.
And from that wholeness, you can finally give freely. You can buy the dinner because you genuinely want to celebrate, not because you are terrified of the FOG.
That is such a beautiful reframe.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that builds on everything we've uncovered today. We've talked about the fear of the boundary, But I want to introduce the concept of financial grief.
Financial grief.
When you finally set that boundary, when you say no to the group chat or refuse the loan, you might not feel liberated right away. You might actually feel grief.
Because things are changing.
Yes. You will mourn the pseudo-self that everyone liked because it was so useful. You might grieve the realization that some people in your life only wanted you around for your utility.
That is a hard truth.
But I want you to consider that this grief is simply the toll you pay to cross the bridge into true belonging. Setting a financial boundary is not an act of rejection towards someone else. It is an act of profound intimacy.
Wow.
Because for the very first time, you are putting down your wallet, standing in your essential self, and trusting that the relationship is strong enough to survive your authenticity.
We have covered so much ground today. We started by looking quietly at that heavy fog that rolls in when we are asked to spend money we don't have. We realize that our financial people-pleasing is not a weakness, but an ancient biological need to belong to the tribe.
We recognize the invisible crab barrel we navigate every day.
Yes, and the terror of the dashboard and the deeply human truth that we spend our resources to feel safe in the eye of others. If this conversation felt true for you, if something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one.
We are building a community here, people who think about money differently. Not as a number to chase, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this. And we are genuinely glad you are here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.